The dust hung heavy in the air as rancher Cole Maddox walked through the town corral, his boots crunching on the sun-baked earth. The late afternoon sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows from the wooden fences that penned in tired horses. And desperate men. The smell of sweat, leather, and gun oil filled the air. The corral wasn't just a place for horses, it was where the lawless and the lawful mingled, a meeting ground for deals better left unspoken. Beside him, a little girl, no more than 7, clutched his hand with all the strength her tiny fingers could muster. Her name was Emma, and her eyes, wide, terrified, searching, were far older than her years. She was silent most of the time, too much silence for a child, but now she broke it with a whisper so soft Cole barely caught it. "Can you take her instead of me?" Her small hand trembled as she pointed toward a young native woman sitting against the fence. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, strands digging into her skin until angry welts formed. Her dress was torn, dust clinging to her skin, her long, dark braids falling forward to hide her face. But no strand of hair could hide the shame in the way she bowed her head. Cole stopped in his tracks, his jaw tightening as he took in the scene. Around them, a group of lawmen and drifters loitered, voices low but cutting. "She'll fetch a fair price," one man muttered. "Pretty one like that, worth more than the horses. Damn shame the kid wasn't taken 2 could have gotten. Double." Their laughter was coarse, empty of mercy. Cole's eyes shifted to Emma. Her lip quivered, but she stood her ground beside him, small and fragile yet refusing to let go of his hand. Her other hand still pointed toward the captive woman, her meaning plain. "If someone has to take me, take her instead." Cole's throat burned with words he didn't speak. His silence had long been his shield. Talking had never saved a man in a gunfight, and it sure as hell wasn't going to save him now. Instead, he studied the woman. She didn't meet his eyes. She sat there, shoulders stiff, her breathing shallow. Every line of her body told him she expected nothing, no help. No mercy, no escape. But Emma expected something. The child's pleading eyes looked up at him as though his silence could be broken into an answer. Cole turned his gaze back toward the men. One leaned on the fence, a grin twisting his face. "You got no stake in this, Maddox. Best keep walking." Another chuckled. "Unless you're in the market. She's wild blood. Ain't worth trouble." Cole's hand flexed at his side, brushing against the worn leather of his gun belt. He could already feel the weight of his revolver tugging at him, the way it always did when men tried to test how far they could push him. Emma's fingers tightened around his hand. "Please," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "Something." Inside him shifted, then not with thunder, but like the quiet crack of a dry branch underfoot. He had come into town with no plan but supplies, yet here he was, standing between a child, a bound woman, and the kind of men who thought human lives were worth the price of cattle. Cole said nothing. He only breathed in the dust, the sweat, the waiting silence that stretched between all of them. The woman finally lifted her head, her dark eyes catching his for the briefest moment. There was no plea there, no hope, only defiance and exhaustion bound together. She expected him to walk away, just as every other man had. And maybe that was what he should have done. But Cole Maddox didn't move, didn't speak. His jaw hardened as he gave a single, deliberate nod, the kind of nod that spoke louder than 100 words. The girl would not be left alone. And neither would the woman. Behind him, mutters rose again, suspicion lacing the air, but Cole didn't care. He knew the cost of silence, and this time his silence meant possession, protection, and promise. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned the color of dying embers, Cole Maddox reached for his knife. With one swift motion, he cut the rope from the woman's wrists. She stared at him, stunned, and Emma pressed herself tighter against his side. Cole holstered his knife, his voice still unspoken. But in that silence, a choice had been made. and nothing in Red Hollow would ever be the same again. The ride back to Cole Maddox's ranch was long and heavy with silence. The little girl Emma perched on the saddle in front of him, her small hands gripping the saddle horn. She leaned against his chest, her head turning now and then to steal cautious glances at the woman riding behind them on his spare horse. The native woman's posture was rigid, her hands raw from the ropes that had bound her only hours earlier. Though free now, she still carried herself like someone chained back straight, eyes scanning the horizon, never once relaxing into the rhythm of the horse. The dust of the trail clung to her hair, the braids frayed and loose. She had said nothing. Since Cole cut her loose in town, Cole didn't force words. Talking wasn't his way. He was a man who believed action spoke louder than any promise. Still, the silence between the three of them pressed harder than the noonday sun. When they reached the ranch, the sound of barking dogs and the creak of the windmill blades filled the air. Cole dismounted, lifting Emma gently down before turning to the woman. She slid off the horse without waiting for his hand, her chin raised as if daring him to test her independence. Inside the corral, one of Cole's ranch hands, Jesse, leaned against a post, chewing straw. His eyes narrowed as he watched the woman. "What in hell you bringin' back here, boss? Looks like trouble." Cole met his gaze with a stare that silenced any further remark. Jesse shrugged, spitting the straw into the dirt, and went back to his chores. The woman's eyes tracked everything. Layout of the barns, the number of men working the pens, the open stretches of land beyond. Cole saw it, the way she measured her chances, the way she stood like a hawk caged among hens. "Hungry?" Cole finally asked, his voice gravel-low from disuse. The woman gave him no answer. Instead, it was Emma who piped up, clutching his sleeve. "She needs food, Cole, and water. She's been hurt." The child's innocence cracked the tension more than any command could. Cole gave a slight nod and motioned toward the house. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and coffee grounds. Emma hurried to the cupboard, pulling down a tin plate, while Cole poured water into a cup. The woman accepted neither at first, her pride flaring hotter than her hunger. But then Emma, with a small stubborn frown, pushed the plate toward her. "Please," the girl whispered. The woman's dark eyes softened just enough. She took the food, eating slow and deliberate, never lowering her guard. Cole leaned against the wall, arms folded. He studied her in silence, the question circling his mind but never making it to his lips. Who was she? Where had she come from? What had those men planned for her? Finally, Emma broke the stillness again. She looked at the woman with wide eyes and asked, "What's your name?" The woman paused, setting down the tin plate. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse from thirst and disuse. "Liana," she said. The name hung in the air, soft yet sharp. Emma smiled as though she'd been handed a gift. "Liana," she repeated, trying it on her tongue. "That's pretty." Cole gave a small grunt, the closest he came to approval. But Liana's gaze shifted quickly back to him. "Why?" she demanded, her voice suddenly fierce. "Why didn't you leave me there? I was not yours to take." Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't look away. "Didn't matter," he said at last. "You were bound. Now you're not." Her lips pressed into a line, her anger dulled by confusion. She had expected cruelty, maybe pity, but not indifference. She couldn't decide if it made him better than the men in town. Or worse. That night, as the sky bled into purple and the coyotes called from the hills, Emma curled up on a cot, already drifting to sleep. Cole sat on the porch, the glow of his lantern flickering across his face. Liana stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her eyes distant. "You should have left me," she said again, her tone quieter this time. Cole didn't move, didn't even turn his head. He simply stared out at the darkened fields, the weight of silence between them once more. But for Liana, that silence spoke clearer than words. He wasn't going to let her go, and for reasons she could not yet name. She wasn't sure she wanted him to. The days that followed settled into a fragile rhythm at the Maddox Ranch, but it was a rhythm built on shifting sand. Emma was the glue. Wherever Liana went, the little girl followed, her small feet padding after the woman like a shadow that refused to be shaken. At first, Liana resisted. She kept her voice clipped, her distance measured. She was polite when forced to be, but always cold, her eyes darting to the horizon as though waiting for the moment she could vanish back into. The wild. Yet Emma didn't relent. Each morning she would appear at Liana's side, comb in hand, asking her to braid her hair. Sometimes Liana ignored her. Sometimes she sighed, muttering words in her native tongue that Emma didn't understand. But then one morning Liana took the comb and worked gently through the child's tangled locks, her hands careful, her face softening despite herself. She hummed as she worked, a tune low and haunting, something of rivers and trees, something of a life Emma had never known. From the porch, Cole Maddox watched it unfold. He sat with his coffee steaming in the early light, hat tipped low, pretending. His attention was on the corral, but his eyes betrayed him. He watched Liana as she braided Emma's hair with steady hands, and for the first time, he caught a glimpse of something more than hardness in her. Still, Cole knew softness wasn't safety. He had seen enough of the world to understand that. When a thing looked peaceful, it was only because trouble hadn't arrived yet, and trouble had a way of finding him. It started with riders. Strangers on the horizon. Men with hats pulled low and rifles slung across their backs. They didn't come to the house, not yet. They circled the ranch instead, far enough to claim coincidence, close enough to remind Cole they were there. Jesse. His ranch hand cursed under his breath whenever he spotted them. "That's the same pack from town," he muttered one evening as the sun dipped low. "They don't take kindly to losing coin. Especially not to you, Cole." Cole didn't answer, just tugged his hat lower and kept working the fence rail. His silence spoke for him, but Jesse pushed anyway. "You can't keep her here. You know that, right? She's a mark now." "You're a mark. And the girl," Jesse spat into the dirt, "the girl suffer for it." Cole's eyes flicked toward the barn where Emma and Liana were tending the horses together. The child was laughing, her clear voice ringing in the dusk. Liana didn't laugh, but her lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile breaking through her guarded expression. "She stays," Cole said flatly. His tone left no room for argument. Jesse cursed again, but didn't press. He knew better than to argue with Maddox once his mind was set. That night, the tension thickened. The dogs barked at shadows. The men slept with rifles propped near their bunks. And though Liana lay on a cot inside, her eyes remained open long into the night, scanning the rafters, her ears straining for every creak of wood or shuffle of feet. By morning, her wariness turned to questions. She found Cole mending tack by the barn and approached him. "They'll come," she said simply. Cole didn't look up. "I know. You risk your land, your men, for me." Her voice sharpened. "Why?" He paused, his hand stilling over the leather strap. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to hers. "Because you're here, that was all. No sermon, no explanation. Just the bare fact, spoken like it was enough." Liana's jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, to spit back that she hadn't asked to be brought here, that she didn't need his pity, his protection. But Emma's voice rang out across the yard, calling her name, tugging her back toward the child's laughter. And in that moment, her anger dissolved into something harder to fight: confusion. The days wore on, each one stretched thin with tension. Emma grew brighter, happier under Liana's watchful care. She learned words from Liana's tongue, saying, Her songs even began to mimic the tilt of her head and the cadence of her steps. But for Cole and his men, unease grew like storm clouds. The riders came more often, closer each time, leaving hoofprints in the dust of his land. One evening, as Cole stood on the porch, lantern light glowing at his back, he saw them again, 5 shadows on horseback, waiting just beyond rifle range. Watching, always watching. Liana joined him, her arms folded tight across her chest. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "They won't stop." Cole's jaw clenched. "Then neither will I." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a vow. And it carried the weight of everything to come. The morning started with the sound of horses. It was faint at first, a distant thunder rolling across the dry earth. Cole Maddox stood on the porch with his coffee mug half raised, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. The sun had barely lifted, painting the land in hues of gold and fire, but already the dust cloud told him what was coming. Riders, and not the passing kind. Behind him, the ranch stirred to life. Jesse came out of the bunkhouse, rubbing sleep from his eyes until he too saw the dust. He muttered a curse and jogged toward the corral, barking orders at the younger hands. Horses whinnied nervously, hooves clattering against the fence rails as though they could sense the tension. Inside the house, Emma's laughter carried faintly, the innocent sound slicing straight through the morning's dread. She was at the table with a wooden doll, humming one of the songs Liana had taught her. Liana herself was at the stove, stirring oats, her braids swinging down her back. But when the sound of hooves drew nearer, she stiffened. The spoon stilled in her hand. Her dark eyes darted toward the door. "They're here," she whispered. Emma blinked up at her, puzzled, but Cole's heavy footsteps on the porch silenced any questions. He set his mug down, slow and deliberate, then reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. Liana's breath caught. "You can't face them all," she said, her voice sharp. Cole checked the chamber of his rifle, sliding it shut with a metallic snap. "Watch Emma," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The riders appeared in full soon after 7 men, each hard-eyed, dust clinging to their coats, rifles and revolvers gleaming in the rising sun. They pulled up just beyond the gate, their leader a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, hat tipped low. His grin was as sharp as broken glass. "Maddox," the scarred man called, voice carrying across the yard. "Heard you been harboring stolen goods." His gaze flicked toward the house. 2 of them, in fact. Cole didn't answer. He stood tall on the porch, rifle cradled in his arms, silent as stone. The scarred man laughed. "That woman. You cut loose in town, she was meant to be sold. And the kid? Well, there's folks who'll pay a fine price for a girl that age." He leaned forward in the saddle, spitting into the dirt. "Now I ain't unreasonable. Hand 'em over, and we ride away clean. You keep your land, your men, your skin. Fair trade." Inside the house, Emma clung to Liana's skirt, fear widening her eyes. "They want me?" she whispered. Liana pressed a hand to the child's hair, her own heart thundering. Cole's jaw tightened, but still he said nothing. He didn't. Need to. His silence was answer enough. The scarred man's grin faded. His hand dropped to his revolver. "That your answer, Maddox?" Cole raised his rifle. The standoff shattered in a single heartbeat. Gunfire cracked through the morning air, echoing off the barns and fences. Horses reared, men shouted, bullets tore into wood and dirt. Cole fired clean, dropping the first rider who dared to draw. Jesse and the ranch hands spilled from the corral, rifles blazing, turning the yard into a storm of lead and dust. Liana pulled Emma to the floor, shielding the girl with her body as glass shattered from a window. The child whimpered, burying her face in Liana's chest, but the woman held her firm. whispering words in her native tongue, old words, protective words. Another shot rang out. Cole ducked behind a post, returning fire with deadly precision. He moved with calm efficiency, every motion practiced, controlled. But there were too many of them. One rider broke through the chaos, charging toward the house. Liana's eyes widened. Her gaze darted to the revolver lying near the fallen body of a ranch hand just outside the doorway. Without hesitation, she lunged. Fingers closing around cold steel, she rose, aimed, and fired. The shot cracked like thunder, and the rider toppled from his horse, landing in a heap of dust and blood. For a moment, silence followed. Then Cole's voice cut through it, sharp and commanding. "Back!" The remaining riders, shaken and bloodied, yanked their horses around. They fired a few parting shots before retreating, dust trailing behind them like smoke. When the yard finally stilled, the ranch with scarred fences splintered, glass shattered, the ground littered with blood. Jesse cursed under his breath, kicking. A dead rider aside, but Cole ignored him. He lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. Inside the house, Liana stood trembling, the revolver still in her hand. Emma clung to her, crying into her dress. Cole stepped through the doorway, his eyes falling. On the scene, for the first time, he saw not just a captive woman, but a fighter, someone who had chosen to stand. "You fight like you belong here," he said quietly. Liana's breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment, the hardness in her eyes gave way to something softer. A ghost of a smile flickered across her lips, though it faded quickly. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths, and in that silence Cole Maddox knew this was only the beginning. The yard reeked of smoke and gunpowder. The bodies of the fallen riders lay where they had dropped, some sprawled in the dust, others twisted near the corral fence. Crows circled overhead, black wings flashing against the pale morning sky. Cole Maddox stood in the center of it all, rifle lowered at his side. His breath came steady, though his heart still thundered in his chest. The fight was over, but he knew well enough the war wasn't. "Boss," Jesse called, wiping blood from a shallow cut on his cheek. He gestured toward the horizon where the riders had fled. "They'll be back, with more." Men like that don't quit easy. Cole gave a single nod. He didn't waste words agreeing with what they both knew. From the doorway of the house, Liana stepped out, Emma clinging tight to her hand. The little girl's face was pale, streaked with tears. Liana crouched, murmuring something low to soothe her before nudging her gently back inside. Then she straightened, her gaze locking on Cole. She still held the revolver she'd fired in the chaos. Her knuckles were white around the grip, though her arms trembled. It was clear the act had cost her, not the aim, but the burden of taking a life. "You should have let them take me," she said flatly, her voice strained but fierce. Cole's jaw tightened. "Not my way." Her dark eyes flashed. "It should be. Look what's already happened. Your men are bleeding. Your land is scarred. For what? For me?" Cole stepped closer, his boots crunching over broken glass and shell casings. "For what's mine to protect." The words hung heavy, carrying more weight than he perhaps intended. Liana's lips parted, but whatever retort she meant to give was lost in the sudden cry from Jesse. "Fire!" All heads whipped toward the barn. Flames licked out from the slats of the weathered wood, smoke billowing black into the morning sky. The riders' retreat had left behind more than bodies. They tossed torches into the hayloft before fleeing. Cole broke into a run, Jesse and the hands at his heels. The heat hit them as they drew close, the roar of fire devouring timber louder than any gunshot. Horses screamed from inside, thrashing against their stalls in terror. Without hesitation, Cole yanked the barn doors wide, a rush of smoke pouring out to choke him. "Get him out," he barked, diving into the haze. Jesse cursed, pulling his bandana over his mouth as he charged in after him. Together they fought through the fire, cutting ropes, shoving panicked horses toward the open air. Flames clawed. Higher, beams groaning overhead, threatening to collapse. And then through the choking smoke Cole saw her Liana. She had darted into the barn, ignoring Emma's desperate cries from the porch. Her dress caught sparks as she swung open a stall gate, shoving a terrified colt toward safety. Her braid whipped behind her as she coughed and fought the heat. "Out!" Cole roared, seizing her arm. "Get out!" But she shook her head, eyes blazing. "There's one more." Before he could stop her, she slipped past him, vanishing deeper into the inferno. Cole cursed, charging after her. The last stall stood at the far end, flames curling down from the rafters. A black mare kicked violently at the wood, eyes rolling white with fear. Liana wrestled the latch open, shoving with all her strength. The mare bolted free, nearly trampling her, but Cole yanked her back just in time. Together they staggered out of the barn as a thunderous crack split the air. The roof caved in behind them, sparks erupting skyward. The barn was gone, but the horses lived. Cole pulled Liana to her feet, her face streaked with ash, her breaths ragged. For the first time since he'd known her, she didn't look guarded, she looked alive. Fierce. "You're mad," he muttered, half in anger, half in awe. "You would have done the same," she rasped out. He couldn't argue. Their eyes locked in the haze of smoke, something unspoken burning hotter than the flames that had nearly claimed them both. Emma's sobs broke the moment. She raced to Liana, flinging her arms around her waist, clinging as though afraid she'd vanish. Liana knelt, holding the child tightly, whispering words of comfort even as her own hand shook. Cole stood over them, the weight of the fire's destruction heavy on his shoulders. His land bore scars now. His men were shaken. And yet, when he looked at Liana and Emma, he felt a clarity that surprised him. They weren't just strays he'd taken in. They were his responsibility, his choice, and the men who thought otherwise were going to learn just how far a silent rancher could go to protect what was his. The days after the fire were quiet, too quiet. The charred skeleton of the barn stood like a blackened reminder of what had been lost, its beams jutting against the sky. The smell of smoke lingered long after the flames had died. Cole's men rebuilt what they could, hammering wood and stringing. New fence lines, but the unease clung to the ranch like a shadow that wouldn't lift. Cole Maddox rode the perimeter of his land each morning, rifle slung across his back, eyes sweeping the horizon. The riders hadn't returned, not yet, but he could feel them out there, waiting, gathering strength. Trouble didn't vanish, it circled until the time was right to strike. Inside the house, life carried on in a fragile rhythm. Emma was back. To laughing, chasing chickens across the yard, her wooden doll bouncing along in her hand. She clung to Liana constantly, as though the woman had become a shield only she could trust. And Liana. She was changing Dot at first. She had moved through the house like a caged hawk, restless and wary. But as days turned into weeks, she began to settle into the work of the ranch. She helped Emma with chores, mended torn clothes, even tended the garden when the sun wasn't too harsh. Still, there was a distance in her eyes, as though part of her stood somewhere else entirely. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in crimson, Cole found her on the ridge behind the house. She stood with her arms folded tight, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Emma's asleep," Cole said, his voice low, breaking the stillness. Liana didn't turn. "She dreams loudly, calls your name even in her sleep." Cole shifted his weight, boots crunching on the dry grass. "She's been through hell. Kids cling to what they think won't leave them. Finally, Liana looked at him. Her dark eyes reflected the dying light. And you think you won't leave her? Cole's jaw tightened. Not if I can help it. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Liana's voice dropped, softer but edged with steel. You don't understand. I don't belong here, Maddox. Emma doesn't either. She is of your world, but I am not. Her hand pressed against her chest. My people are out there, somewhere beyond these hills. And every day I stay, I betray them. The songs I teach Emma, the stories I tell, they are not meant for this place. They are meant for children of my blood. Cole studied her, the words caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that belonging wasn't bound by blood or land. But his nature held him silent. He only stood there, steady as stone, his presence an answer in itself. Liana shook her head, frustration flaring. You think silence is enough? That by saying nothing, you prove everything? But silence doesn't give me a place. It doesn't give Emma a future. Her words cut sharper than any blade. Cole's hands flexed at his sides. He wasn't a man for speeches. He had lived too long with silence as his language. And yet, for the first time, he wished he could find the words. Emma's voice broke the moment. The child came running up the ridge, her small face flushed, hair loose from its braid. She grabbed Liana's hand with one fist and Cole's with the other. Stop frowning, she said, her tone scolding. We're together. That's enough. Liana's heart twisted. She looked down at the child, at her wide, trusting eyes, and the words she had meant to speak dissolved. Emma pressed their hands together, her small fingers forcing Cole's rough palm into Liana's. There, Emma said with a triumphant nod. Now we make a new one. Not your world. Not yours. Ours. For the first time in days, Liana smiled truly. Smiled. The sound of Emma's laugh was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, but when night fell and the house was quiet, Liana lay awake on her cot, staring at the ceiling. Emma's words echoed in her mind, sweet and dangerous. A new world. A family forged in choice, not blood. And yet, as the coyotes howled in the distance, Liana knew the riders weren't the only ones circling. Her own people were out there. Two. She could feel it. She belonged to two worlds now, and sooner or later, she would be forced to choose between them. The ranch lay quiet beneath a moon half hidden by drifting clouds. Crickets chirped in the grass, and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods that lined the creek. Cole Maddox sat at the kitchen table, lantern light flickering across his weathered face. His hands rested on the wood, big and scarred from years of rope, reins, and hard work. The silence pressed against him, heavy as the desert night. The door creaked softly. Liana stepped inside, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes shadowed but unflinching. She had waited until Emma was asleep before coming to him. Cole's eyes lifted. He didn't move, but something in his stillness sharpened, as if he had been expecting her. You never answered me, she said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of weeks, maybe months, of unspoken questions. Back at the corral, when the girl asked you to take me instead, you said nothing, but you acted. Why? Cole's jaw worked, but no words came. He leaned back slowly, the chair groaning beneath him. I need to know, she pressed, stepping closer. Why take me? Why carry the burden of a stranger, when no one would have blamed you for walking away with only the child? Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the fire of needing truth. Cole finally spoke, his voice low, gravelly. Because I couldn't leave either of you there. That's it. That's not it, Liana snapped, her composure cracking. Men don't risk their land, their name, their life for no reason. You could have saved her and ridden off. Number. One would have cared if I was sold, traded, left to rot. So why me too? Cole's eyes darkened. His silence stretched. But this time it wasn't empty. It was fighting something inside him. Liana's hands balled into fists. Do you know what it feels like to belong nowhere? To be tied between two fires and know that whichever way you turn, you'll burn? That's what you gave me when you took me. A life between two worlds. Her breath came fast, her chest rising and falling. The lantern light caught the sheen of tears in her eyes. Cole stood suddenly, the chair scraping hard against the floor. He loomed over her, but his voice was not harsh, it was steady, raw. I took you because I saw the way you lowered your head like you'd already been broken, and I couldn't stomach it. I've seen cattle driven harder than most men, seen friends cut down because no one gave a damn. But you, his hand twitched at his side as though he wanted to reach for her, but held himself back. You still had fight in you, even bound, even shamed. You were still holding on. I wasn't about to let them kill that. Liana froze. His words cut through her like a blade, but not with pain. With something dangerously close to hope. And Emma? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cole's gaze softened at the mention of the girl. She's just a child. Didn't deserve any of it. Neither did you. Liana's throat tightened. So you took us both out of pity? His eyes locked with hers, sharp as a drawn gun. Don't twist my words. I didn't take you out of pity. I took you because something in me said I'd regret it every damn day if I rode away. And I don't carry regrets easy. The room fell silent, heavy with the weight of confession. For the first time since she had come to his ranch, Liana's defenses faltered. She stepped closer, her breath mingling with his in the lantern-lit stillness. And now? She whispered. Do you regret it? Cole's chest rose and fell. His hand finally lifted, slow, deliberate, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. His touch was rough, calloused, but it lingered like a promise. No, he said simply. Not once. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The walls she had built, the bitterness she clung to, cracked beneath the quiet truth in his voice. She wanted to pull away, to guard herself, but her body betrayed her. She leaned into the warmth of his hand. Their closeness was interrupted by the sharp cry of Emma from the other room. Liana jerked back, the spell broken. Cole stepped aside, letting her pass. She hurried to the child, who whimpered in her sleep, clutching her doll. Cole lingered in the doorway, watching the two of them. Liana rocked Emma gently, murmuring in her native tongue, her voice soft and soothing. For a fleeting moment, they looked like a family, his family. But in the corner of his mind, Cole knew the world outside his walls wouldn't see it that way. Trouble was coming from riders, from neighbors, maybe even from her own people. And when it came, silence would no longer be enough. Asterisk dawn broke over Maddox Ranch in a blaze of crimson, painting the sky as though the heavens themselves sensed blood in the air. Cole Maddox stood on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the thin trail of dust rising from the horizon. Riders. Too many of them dot behind him. Emma clutched the doorway, her little hands white against the frame. Are they coming for us? She whispered. Cole didn't answer. His silence was enough. Inside, Liana tied her long hair back and moved quickly, checking the pistol Cole had given her days before. She had never handled such a weapon with comfort, but now her hands were steady, her jaw set. She would not be bound again. Not here. Not while Emma breathed. By the time the riders came into view, Cole had already counted 15. Men from town drifters, ranch hands, bounty hunters' faces twisted with greed and hatred. They wanted the girl. They wanted Liana. They wanted to make an example of a man who thought he could stand against the current. The leader, a tall brute named Briggs, reined his horse to a stop at the edge of the yard. Maddox! He shouted, his voice carrying like a war drum. You've got what belongs to us. Hand over the squaw and the brat, and we'll let you keep your land. Stand in our way, and you'll be buried under it." Cole didn't move. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, but his voice carried clear. "They don't belong to you. Not now. Not ever." Briggs laughed, spitting into the dirt. "You think one man can hold off all of us?" Cole chambered around and lifted his rifle. "One man's enough." The standoff cracked like thunder. Gunfire erupted, the ranch exploding into chaos. Cole fired with ruthless precision, dropping 2 men before they even cleared the fence line. Bullets ripped into the wooden porch, shattering planks, splintering beams. Emma screamed, Liana dragged her behind the heavy kitchen table, shielding her small body with her own. Cole moved like a force of nature, stepping off the porch into the open yard, his rifle barking fire. He fought not like a man defending property, but like one defending his soul. Every shot was measured, every pull of the trigger a promise. Neither girl would be taken alive. Briggs roared, spurring his horse forward, pistol blazing. Cole spun, caught the horse in the chest with a bullet, sending man and beast crashing into the dirt. But more riders poured in, circling like wolves. Liana felt the pistol heavy in her hand. For a moment she hesitated, then one of the men broke through, lunging for the door. She raised the weapon, squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, the man dropped. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her chest heaved, but her eyes burned with fire. Cole caught sight of her from the yard. A flicker of pride surged through him, even as he ducked another volley of gunfire. The fight dragged brutal and bloody. Men fell, but Cole's shoulder took a grazing shot. His side burned where another round tore through flesh. He gritted his teeth, fighting on, because to fall meant to leave them to hell. At last, the yard fell silent save for the groans of dying men. Briggs, bloodied but alive, staggered to his feet, eyes wild with hate. He grabbed a fallen rifle, aimed it toward the house, toward Emma. "No!" Liana's scream tore the air as she stepped from cover, putting herself between Briggs and the girl. Time seemed to halt. Cole, bleeding, saw the rifle lift, saw the future in an instant. The woman he saved, the child he swore to protect, both about to be torn from him. With a roar, he surged forward. His revolver cracked once. The shot slammed Briggs in the chest, throwing him backward into the dust. Silence followed. Cole swayed, his vision swimming. Liana rushed to him, catching his weight against her as Emma cried out, clinging to his side. "You're hurt," Liana whispered fiercely, pressing her hands to his wound. Cole managed a weak smile, his eyes finding hers. "I've been hurt worse. Long as you two are safe, it's worth it." Tears blurred her vision, but she shook her head. "No, not worth it if you fall. You don't fight alone anymore, Cole Maddox." He looked at her, then truly looked, and saw not a captive, not a burden, but a woman who had chosen to stand with him, even when the world would never forgive it. And in that moment, the silence that had defined him for so long finally broke. "You belong here," he whispered. "Both of you, with me." The words were ragged, but they were a vow. Liana leaned into him, pressing her forehead to his. Emma hugged them both, her small body trembling. As the sun climbed higher, the Maddox ranch stood bloodstained but unbroken. 15 men had come to claim what wasn't theirs. None had succeeded. In the heart of that battered land, beneath the Kila the Matfinen wide western sky, 3 souls stood bound, not by rope, not by law, but by something stronger. Love, fierce and unyielding. The West would come for them again. But when it did, it would not find a frightened girl, or a shamed woman, or a silent rancher. It would find a family.